Okay, it's now 5:30. And what happens too when you press start? It takes like 10 seconds and it freaks me out.
All right, you ready?
We are ready.
Okay. Here we go.
So now, to double click.
Good evening. If everybody's ready, we'll call the meeting to order. This is the Encinitas Environmental Commission. Can we get a roll call, please, Camille?
Sure. Commission Chair Novi,
Present?
Commissioner Parker,
Here?
Commissioner O'Connor,
Here.
and Commissioner Morrison.
Present.
Let the record show that there are 4 environmental commissioners present this evening, with Adams, Kramer, and Switzler absent.
Thank you very much. Please rise if you wish to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda tonight.
Okay, do we have any oral communications?
No oral communications tonight.
I see we have no presentations. And so our first action item here will be approval of the previous minutes. Anybody have any edits or changes? Thing is not working. They're loading. Okay, anybody have any edits or changes, or we can entertain a motion to approve?
We were all gone except for you.
So what did we decide about this? We talked about this last week,
I watched it live, so I could probably,
but we need, all 4 need to vote, to get a quorum, so, all right, I'll make a motion to approve. Anybody want a second?
I'll second it by watching it.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have approved minutes. Informational item, and we'll throw over to Crystal.
Okay, thanks, Chair Novi. So the next item is the 2022 tentative presentation schedule and presentation history. So I'll bring up the schedule. So we've got next month scheduled, Commissioner Adams will be giving a presentation on solar power programs. And we've got the following 2 months open and some topic ideas down here. And this is your opportunity to throw out any other topic ideas you may have.
I was speaking with Clean Earth for Kids, a local North County nonprofit, and they were willing to come in and talk about the things that they work on. So I'd throw that out there as a potential presenting group.
Get him for November.
I can ask.
All right. Anybody have anybody they want to do for December? We can revisit next month too.
Okay, moving on. That wraps up the item. Do you want to move on to item B?
Yes, please.
Okay, and that would be Mr. Takis is here from Public Works, and she'll be talking about the Green Block Leader program.
Good evening, Commissioners. I am Ashley Stratakis. I'm the Management Analyst in the Public Works Department, and I oversee the city's Zero Waste program. And I'm here to give a brief presentation on an exciting pilot project that we are about to get started. It's a Green Block Leader program, which is modeled after a similar program with the city of Palo Alto. And the idea is we want to gather environmentally conscious residents of Encinitas and have them help support the city with outreach and education, because in the past we have had residents reach out and ask how they can help, and we want to give them that opportunity. So we have this pilot program, and we're inviting 10 volunteers to be trained by staff, And once they're trained, they will be able to provide outreach and education on behalf of the city regarding environmental programs with a focus on zero waste for the city, especially with regards to organics recycling and regular blue bin recycling, as we know, has become pretty problematic. So let me see. So here's a little bit of information about it. Fortunately, we have enough participants who have signed up for the program. So at this time, if anyone else is interested, they can still reach out to recycling@encinitasca.gov and we can put them on the list. So when and hopefully if we're able to expand the program, we can invite more volunteers to participate. But happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, I want to thank you for doing this. I think it's going to be great. I signed up, and I put it out to the rest of the Environmental Commission to sign up. I think we are a perfect group to be green block leaders, if you can, in your neighborhood. I don't work, so. I think, so I'm in the UFAC, and I think I reached out to you about this would be a great group of people to have additional communication with neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
And so I think this would be just, a great arm of the communication strategy in the city. So I just really wish all the best for this program.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you so
All
much.
right, thank you guys.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the Green Building Ordinance Council readoption for consistency with the 2022 Title 24 Building Code from Crystal. This is an update.
Thank you, Chair Novi. Okay, so if you recall, about a year, just less than a year ago, Council adopted the Green Building Ordinance, which enacted all of the REACH codes that we needed to implement all of the measures in the climate action plan that are related to buildings. So building energy efficiency, solar requirements for commercial, and then the all-electric requirement for all new buildings. So, and I actually have that on the next screen. Yeah, here they all are. These were all the ones that were adopted. So existing residential energy efficiency, all-electric construction of new buildings, non-residential energy efficiency, and then non-residential solar PV. Those were the 4 components. We just recently got our ordinance approved by the state agencies. That was in August 2nd. I've reported that to you the past couple months. But now is actually the timing of, I will share with you the next slide. Every 3 years, the state's Title 24 building code is readopted. It's revised and readopted by the state. And every time the state does that, every local municipality has to reincorporate those state codes into their local municipal code. So every 3 years, we have to go through this process to account for any of the updates. And concurrent with that, we also have to readopt any REACH codes. So basically, the code that just became effective has to be readopted in order to continue to be effective when the new building code is effective, which is on January 1st of 2023. So there are some changes to the energy and green codes that would affect our REACH code. So there are some codes that have become more advanced in the state code and essentially are superseding our REACH code, just a couple of them. Most of them we can just readopt, but a few we just had to cross-check and verify that now that's covered in the state code, and so it doesn't have to be a REACH code for Encinitas. So that's the process we've been going through as staff to kind of rectify the two codes. And we're about ready to take that to council. And what I wanted to do before that is present this process to you and present to you the changes that needed to be made. They were all fairly minor. There's nothing, we're not proposing any new reaches per se or new advanced requirements. There's some clarifications that we are using this opportunity to make in the code, some things that we realized needed some clarification or we realized were infeasible. So I'll go over this in detail. It's a lot on the page, so I'll just make sure I kind of go through it so you understand what some of the changes are. And then, so let's just dive right in. So one of the main things that you'll notice is the last time we did this, we adopted one ordinance that covers two parts of the code, the energy code and the green building code. This time around, to make it cleaner and easier for the state agencies, we're actually separating that out into two ordinances. So we're going to have an ordinance for the energy code requirements and then a separate ordinance for the green building code. So it's gonna look messy on the track changes and red line versions of the codes when we're sharing with council what we're adopting, but the main reason for that is because we're separating it out to make it easier for the state agencies to, because only the energy code needs to go to the California Energy Commission and not the green building code. So, and we are moving the all-electric requirement into the green building code, so it doesn't have to go to the Energy Commission for approval. And that's been determined by that state agency that they don't need to approve it. So to make it a more efficient process, we have to make this adjustment with the two ordinances. Okay, so now let's dive into the energy code. So for the solar PV requirement for new and existing non-residential, the only change there was that we are proposing the deletion of the time-dependent valuation compliance option. If you recall, we had two options to comply with the solar PV, time-dependent valuation or just a flat set amount of solar that you needed to install on a building. So rather than being able to run a calculation, we're just going to use that flat rate option. The reason why is we determined in doing some test run calculations that this requirement is actually essentially infeasible. When you run it, it usually sizes the system to be very, very large, and so large, in fact, that SDG&E would effectively not even allow you to install a system so large. SDG&E wants buildings to right-size their system for the load that they're using. When you're oversizing, it actually causes complications for them on their side of the system. So in order to make our code workable with the SDG&E process, we're recommending that this part of the code get removed. And also, we figure that most people would not want to upsize their buildings so much and would almost never select this option anyway. So, okay, moving on. For energy efficiency for existing residential, there were a couple changes here. So one additional thing that we've done is we're offering more measures to comply with the energy efficiency requirements than we previously did. Previously, there were about 3 options, and we only included those few options because those were the ones that were cost effective. I can't remember what they are exactly right now. I think right now what they were something like duct sealing. It depends on the vintage of your home, which measures you'd be eligible for that are cost effective. But we figured, even though there's a few that are cost effective, we may as well open up the opportunity, say if someone doesn't want to do duct sealing, but they want to add insulation and they want to voluntarily do something that may not be cost effective per se, but that's what they want to choose to do. We didn't want to preclude them from choosing that option because it does also have the energy efficiency benefit to it. So we basically included a table of all of the additional all of the options that they could choose with the energy efficient or the cost effective ones in there and all the other options. So more choices. And then the next bullet highlights some of the other minor modifications we made to just kind of clarify some of the energy efficiency requirements. So, for example, in the lighting package option, we thought it would make sense to require photocells on the exterior lighting. A photocell is when There's a sensor on the top of the light that can tell when it's bright or not, so when the sun's out, and the light would automatically turn off. So we felt like that was a good, effective energy efficiency component that's still cost effective, that could be included in that package without being too significant of a requirement. It seemed pretty logical. The next one is to require, when you do opt for duct sealing, we're clarifying that if you already have duct sealing, that could qualify as meeting the requirement, but only if you have a verification that was within the last 3 years that it was completed. Or sorry, let me read that a little bit more carefully. So your duct sealing project had to be within the last 3 years, and it needs to have a verification certification along with it. So we wouldn't be able to have someone comply if they just said, oh, my ducts are sealed, so I can check the box. They have to verify it. It has to be within the last 3 years. The next one is for the cool roof. The new code actually has different cool roof requirements for low sloped roofs and for steep sloped roofs. So our code did not include the low sloped roof specifications, so we've added that in. The next one is for extended air sealing from the attic, and this is for multifamily only. But basically what we're saying is that the air sealing should be, let's see, safety. So it should be not just in the attic, but the whole house of that multifamily unit. And then the last one clarification is that instead of requiring only R5 insulation, we wanted to up that slightly to R19, and that's more consistent with the state code, R19. And then lastly, in the energy code is the section on energy efficiency for existing non-residential. So here, it's what ended up happening is this is the one place in the code, in our REACH code, that was superseded by the state code. So this section essentially gets removed from our REACH code. And then what's nice about that is the whole state now is requiring these additional energy efficiency measures of existing buildings. So it's still happening, it's just not a REACH anymore in our local code. Okay, and then the last slide goes over the green building code, which would be in a separate ordinance. So this new ordinance would cover, and this code would cover the all-electric building requirements and EV charging. It would also cover gray water, but I'm not highlighting it on this slide because there were only very minor clarification points that we made in the changes. So first, starting with all electric, again, this covers new residential and non-residential, so nothing new there. The clarification, the first bullet is just sharing that we've moved it from the energy code to Cal Green, as I explained before. And then we also added a more clear definition of what an all-electric building is. We just made it more clear what the end uses are of an all-electric building so that when an applicant reads it, it's very obvious what they need to do to comply. And also our definition is now more consistent with other cities that also have a similar requirement. We also added a definition of new construction. This is something that we got a lot of questions about even before the ordinance became effective. And so now we have a much clearer definition of this, and that will be included in the code as well. We're also referencing fuel gas, and we had a lot of questions on whether or not a propane tank is allowed or not under the code. And so we're clarifying that the intention was that propane tanks are also not allowed. And so we've defined what fuel gas is and clarified that propane is not allowed. And then lastly, we are recommending the deletion of exception 3 to this requirement. So there's 3 exceptions total to the all-electric requirement, and the third one is for utility service costs. So this exception would apply if on the utilities side of the meter, the cost to upgrade the system to serve your all-electric home was 20% greater than if you were doing just a mixed-use home. What we've learned through some investigation and some inquiries by some applicants and some discussions with SDG&E is that the way that this requirement was worded was infeasible, essentially. We required the applicant to ask for documentation of this from SDG&E, and SDG&E is actually not able to provide documentation to compare two different options of service. They are only legally allowed by their state mandates to provide the one service that is requested. So unfortunately, on the documentation end, this exception became infeasible. We looked at some other options of exceptions, but determined that there was nothing aside from having some sort of backup documentation that could kind of be an alternative. So right now what staff is recommending is just to remove the exception. Moving on to the next section, EV charging for new residential single family, or I shouldn't say family, it's just new residential, typo there. I'm realizing I'm not in presentation mode. Sorry about that. There you go. Now you can read it a little better. So new residential. So here we've added some exceptions that were consistent with the 2022 code for EV charging, and these are for ADUs and JADUs. These are to support additional housing without having the burden of requiring EV charging. And then last section is EV charging for new and existing multifamily and non-residential. So there were, again, some updated exceptions to make it more consistent with CalGreen. And then lastly, maintain local requirements. Okay, so this one means that, so our minimum requirement for multifamily and non-residential, the percentage required, is not changing, but in the state code, there's actually additional percentage requirements for EV capable spaces and EV ready spaces. So in addition to having those physical charging stations be available and ready to use, an applicant would need to also be prepared for future EV stations to come in. So EV capable stations have the conduit run, so just the pipe that's able to take the wire, so that the trench is there, so that if they ever wanted to run the wires and install a charger, they could. And then EV ready goes a little bit further, and it requires the applicant to install the wiring and have the space in their electrical panel to be able to serve a future charging station. And that wraps up my update on how we're going to readopt the green building REACH codes. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Crystal. I did work on that back last year, and I am currently having the fun that you are of struggling with what 2023 building code looks like for multifamily. And we are getting all our plans into the cities now. However incomplete they are, not comply with some of these regulations. Do you guys have a schedule of adoption? The city will receive the state new building code in October, so therefore you guys can adopt it in November, and then it becomes codified on the 1st, because what I've heard, my personal experience is that the state is just sending stuff out because the deadline's there and it's not complete. So it's still kind of fuzzy on what's required.
Yeah, so we are trying to meet the deadline of January 1st, 2023 as our effective date, so that we have no gap in the code, in our REACH code. And so to do that, we have to get to council by the end of September for the first reading. And then our second reading would be mid-August. And I've consulted with the Energy Commission staff, and they've said that that would be enough time for them to do their adoption, their certification on their end, and have it be effective by the January 1st deadline. And that's just for the energy code. That's the only one now, since we're doing this bifurcation of the two ordinances, only the energy code, so only these requirements here for solar and energy efficiency would need to go to the Energy Commission for that approval. And then the Green Building Code only needs to now go to the Building Standards Commission, and their approval process is much shorter. It's more like a week to 1 to 3 weeks is typically what it is. So there'd be plenty of time to have these be approved and be able to be enacted by January 1st. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Crystal.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on to action items here. Environmental Commission work plan update. Back to Crystal.
Thank you. Let me pull up the work plan. Okay, so here's your work plan updates for this month. I'll just highlight the new items, which are in red. So for community outreach, I wanted to share that Encinitas Eco Fest will be on October 9th. And we've got a date for Cyclovia as well. That's going to be on January 8th of 2023. And I also did want to share at this point that that commissioners are welcome to participate in the outreach during the event. So I will be hosting a sustainability booth, me and our Civic Spark fellow. So if any of you are interested in helping out at that booth, you're more than welcome to come along and share environmental information and connect with the public and share what you're doing for the commission as well. So just feel free to reach out to me after the meeting and we can coordinate that. The next thing is on sea level rise. I wanted to share that Development Services staff is currently developing a climate vulnerability assessment and adaptation framework. And this is part of the general plan safety element update. And I've actually asked that staff person to bring to you a presentation about that update so you can review the document and provide any comments. It's should be ready pretty soon, so it might actually be next month or the following month that they'll be available to provide that presentation to you.
What's the desired schedule for council approval on that?
That is a good question. I think it's towards the end of this year. I'm not sure if it's before the end of the year or sometime early next year, but I can clarify that for you.
Yeah, and I'd also be curious, when was the last time, if ever, is this a new general plan element or was it an update?
The safety element is existing, but the addition of the vulnerability assessment is new. Yeah.
It's an interesting topic, and I think a lot of us have wondered what level of engagement various commissions should really have on general plan element, update and creation. So I know I'll be excited to learn more about this one.
Good. Yeah, I was glad I noticed this and also noticed that it's part of your work plan, and I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to review it and be able to comment.
Oh, it's great. Thank you for doing that. We've been holding sea level rise on the work plan for years.
Yeah.
Honestly, for years, and there hasn't been formal action, and we've elected to keep it on the work plan, sort of in case. So that may inform some of our next year's work plan thought process as well, because this is not something I was aware that there was action coming.
Yeah. You make an excellent point, and we can talk about it at the next item further.
Thank you.
Okay, and so the next item I wanted to share is regarding the CAP implementation. Staff held 2 free green building ordinance trainings for the public. On August 25th, there was a lunchtime option and a dinner option at the Encinitas Library, and we did that as a result of the green building ordinance becoming effective on August 2nd, and wanted to make sure the public was aware of the new requirements. Oh, sure.
With the new green building code and everything coming out,
Mhm.
is redoing the cap on the work plan for next year too, since that, a lot of those things would be, already surpassed.
Yeah. Yep. It is actually. We're at the 5-year. We're getting right at up to 5 years now, and the cap is required to be updated every 5 years. And so I have a contract in the works right now to initiate the cap update work, and I definitely would want the commission involved in that. So if you're amenable to adding it to your work plan and being a part of it, I think that'd be a great addition. Okay, and the next item is cyclovia, just again sharing that the date for the next cyclovia is January 8th. And that is it. Anything else that we're missing here that should be included in the work plan update?
This is a minor point, but, that number 11 there, the environmental nexus to general plan element updates relates, also to the.
Oh, yeah.
So I just wonder if you could mention it in there, because
Uh-huh.
we have struggled to understand how to do that, so it would be nice to capture something that we're actually getting meat on the bones with there.
Yeah, I will definitely add it there as well.
Thank you. Any other comments, additions? So I guess we will make a motion to approve with the one minor addition included. I'll make the motion. Anybody want a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Oh.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you so much, Crystal.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we are on to commissioner-initiated agenda items, and this is the discussion of the work plan from the subcommittee. So Commissioner Parker, I guess you are the lone ranger from the subcommittee today.
Yes, so the subcommittee of Robert Switzler and Katie Kramer and I met, and we talked about it. And then Crystal met with her boss, Roy. And
Powell.
he suggested that we make changes to the work plan that are, have more specific items instead of having very general statements that would indicate work that the Environmental Commission wants to be involved with. And Crystal can talk a little more about this, so.
Yeah, so as you know, Roy's been around the city for quite a while, and he's got a lot of experience, and he actually used to be the staff liaison for the Planning Commission, so that's where part of his expertise comes from. And so one kind of benefit to their work plan is they target very specific projects that they work on within their work plan, things that they know that they can achievably get done within a given year. And it helps to kind of hone in on what the commission wants to do for that year, and provides council with an opportunity to really ensure that work, with the assistance of staff and the staff resources that the city has the capability of supporting the commission. So all of the current goals and in the current work plan are really great to keep track of, but I think within some of those, there's some specific projects that you have have come up and have been working on, but to memorialize them a little bit more specifically in the work plan would be a little bit more helpful for council to understand the breadth of work that you would like to work on, and then to more clearly be able to plan for resources for that next year for you. So I hope that explains it well enough. Mainly the revision that I think the subcommittee would do is they would look at all of these current goals and think about some specific projects that would fall into some of these. I mean, you don't need to come up with a project for every single one. I think that's a lot of work, and that's not typically what you've done anyway. So if there is some key projects that you want to get done within the next year, then those are the ones that could be highlighted in the work plan with reference to these goals. I think somehow we still want to memorialize that these are great goals to have and keep them in the work plan somehow, but then just highlighting the specific projects that you'd like to actively work on.
So for example, I'm interested in trying to get a tree canopy goal for the city. And it's not in this, can you go up? I forget, it was going to be in
Was it-
vegetation management?
I think so,
Where it
yeah.
was? Yeah. So, to have a more specific sentence that would reflect working on a tree canopy goal is an example of one. So I'd like to, open a discussion up amongst the commissioners to see if you like the idea of having, a more specific goals or projects that you want to work on within the work plan. And if you have any particular things that you would like to add to the work plan, so our subcommittee is going to meet in the next month or so to try to add wording to the work plan for the coming year. And so if you guys have any projects you would like to bring up tonight, or if you'd like to email me later, would appreciate it.
I was just saying, it's a great idea to have some detail in all of these goals to be able to grasp a hold of, to move something forward. I think that's a great idea.
So maybe I'll just give a little historic point of view. So, I think the Environmental Commission, in the past has very purposefully kept things a little broad, in large part because it's not as clear for the Environmental Commission relative to, say, the Planning Commission, exactly what the confines of what its work are. If you look at the policies that created this commission and kind of govern what it is, there's a lot of purview, and it's not always clear what the vehicles, are going to be, for affecting change, right? But that being said, it's always better to have more detail, where there's really an intent to get work done. It sounds to me like there's really I've always felt that the purpose of the plan is really twofold. One is it has to go to the council, and so it's an opportunity for us to be as clear as we can be with the council, and get their approval on the work that we're doing. And then what Crystal just mentioned earlier is that there are staff and other city resources that go into enabling the work of the commission, and so insofar as the plan can aid in the understanding of that resource allocation, that's really helpful as well. So I think those are two things that really should be thought about. I dislike hand-waving what we think the council likes, because we don't know until we talk to them or we put something in front of them. Various council members in the past have all been different. Some council members love talking, with us informally, about things we might want to have on here, and others go, no, we want you to generate it and put it up, and that's always going to change, with the composition of the council. With the mayor, not seeking another term, I think we're looking at a very different council in one way or another. And so, I think it's important that we produce a document this year that is going to be useful, even if the composition of the council changes even quite dramatically. So I think it's always worth it to, have a political conversation, and we are political appointees, and so we are allowed to do that in a way that staff is not allowed to do that, right? So I think that's important. And then the other thing I would say is, let's look at the past years and look at the work that's been accomplished. And in particular, if there's work that's not being accomplished, or if much of the substantive work that is being accomplished is not present in the work plan, or was not present in the work plan, let's it's useful to analyze that. I think that former Commissioner Jim Wong is really an excellent person to kind of look at. He probably was more successful pushing forward more, new ordinances and policies and rules and regulations than probably anybody that sat on this commission for a really long time. And, you know, when I've studied sort of his approach, it's hard to fit it into a rubric, you know, and he really learned about each issue that he wanted to engage in. If the right thing was, you know, going through the CAP process, he went through the CAP process. If the right thing was proposing an ordinance, he went through, you know, he proposed an ordinance. If the right thing was getting engaged in a rulemaking process on some other thing or engaging another commission, or like on community choice energy, paying very close attention to what was happening in Solana Beach and other neighboring cities, you know, he went and did that. And that, you know, that approach, I'll be honest, I think was enabled in part by having a much looser, less specific plan. But that may no longer be the case, right? So I think it's just important. I'll support anything, honestly. And also, the council and others have always been very gracious with our commission. If something pops up, you know, a few items pop up in the middle of the year that are not on the plan, but we feel are important, in my memory, there's never been somebody going, you can't look at that because it's not on the plan. So again, I think, you know, let's really think about this from the perspective of how do we want to organize our work? And then, you know, the two big drivers of that being, in what way and at what level of detail do we want the council to approve as sort of a policy statement, the direction and efforts of our commission for the course of a year, and, you know, be really sensitive to the staff and their resource allocation, and recognize that they're going to look at this document and as best as they can try to line up resources that they think we need in order to do the business, you know, for that time. I will say I have always wanted to, and I can only blame myself because I think for the last 3 years I was on the subcommittee, but I have always wanted to prune this list down a lot more. I think we hold a lot of things that we want to pay attention to. You know, but dilute it a little bit, although today is proving me wrong in that, because it turned out to be very important that we've let, you know, for example, sea level rise just hang on this document for a few years. You know, that did help Crystal realize it was something we wanted to pay attention to, even without having to have a direct conversation. But in general, I would say I would like to prune this document down, and I kind of love the idea of at least a few, you know, for some of these, you know, things that remain, have a more concrete, you know, goal, you know, that we want to get at. I would be for that.
Yeah.
That was a lot, sorry.
And if I could just add to what you said, Chair Novi, if you don't mind, I think to kind of achieve both goals at the same time, I think we could retain this list of goals in some way in the work plan, and then have kind of the separate, you know, work plan projects be their own table, so we could kind of preserve both, but provide that additional clarity that I think is being sought.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. You know, it's sort of historic, this idea that we need to connect to, you know, we have these categories that connect to the, you know, the sort of guiding policy document of this commission, which, by the way, a lot of time was spent 3 years ago in updating that policy, and that was no fun. And we got to give Jim credit for that one too. He led that process. And then also, you know, connecting with these icons we have in here to the council's approved strategic plan. And I don't know the schedule on which that may or may not change. You know, that's one thing is we've had to deal with, is changing those things, or especially the council-driven ones, as the council sees fit to change those priorities. But those are conventions. There's no requirement to put that in. And you know, I would probably defer to staff in terms of their recommendation for how useful, you know, those continued inclusions are.
Yeah, we actually had a bit of discussion about that among staff, and we actually did really like the structure of your work plan in terms of identifying council goals or strategies. So I think we should retain those and retain your commission goals, so it's clear what your, you know, line of thinking was in terms of identifying the goals. But then just add that additional piece of the specificity of the projects.
I think it's a good idea. So you'd see that as a separate second table.
I think so. That's what I'm kind of envisioning, is retaining this table somehow as kind of memorializing what your core areas of consideration are, I guess. And then you'd have a separate table that included your work plan projects for the next fiscal year, and then you could even stratify that, like if you had, more project, I could help assess like how many projects we're talking about and whether that's feasible with the current staff allocations, and maybe stratifying like some of the most important projects and maybe some, if there's time projects, and then some projects where we want to keep them on the list, but they're just, we can tell basically by the body of work that we wouldn't be able to get to them, but we still want to memorialize them on the work plan. We could kind of have those three stratifications, if that makes sense to you, and then have kind of that complete list go to council with all of your kind of ideas in one spot.
Works for me, and I'll, just to be substantive about it, I think, at least for me, the work plan item that I probably would put the most, meat on the bones of would be the ongoing work for native plant policy. I think that's pretty durable. There's a massive process. We're a piece of that process, and some of us need to keep in that process pretty heavily.
Yeah, that's the perfect example of a very specific project where there's actionable work that is being done by the commission. Mm-hmm. No, this was just an informational item, so if there's not any other discussion, we can move to the next item. Yeah.
It is an action item.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, so
Oh.
what's our potential
What's
action
the
here?
action? It was to receive the update.
Okay, so we have actioned through reception, but there's no vote or anything needed.
I don't think so,
I think we
no.
did hear
Yeah.
from Carol, we should email, any of the subcommittee members if we have ideas for any specific, guidance on this. And then the expectation is that a draft will come in October and we can have further discussion as a group and see where we can get to.
And I'm sorry, just as a point of order, any communication outside of this Environmental Commission meeting needs to go through Crystal Nahara, the liaison, to avoid a Brown Act violation.
Thank you for the
Since
reminder.
we have 3 subcommittee members already working on the work plan, so any communication needs to go through Crystal, which she can then share with the subcommittee.
Thank you. So we will rephrase. Anything that should go on here, people should email to Crystal, and Crystal will communicate it to the subcommittee.
And if you could please remind the whole commission to provide any
Oh, yeah.
work plan.
Yeah, I can send out an email. to
So,
remind.
yeah, put that on before the next
Yeah.
work plan subcommittee meeting.
Yeah, that's a good question. When is the next subcommittee meeting so we know the date we need to get input in by?
It's not scheduled yet,
Okay.
but probably within the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
We'd try to schedule something, yeah.
So quickly.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Carol, and those who aren't here who are on the subcommittee. Okay, any other comments, questions on work plan? Okay, so moving on, number 10 here, any updates of items of interest by anybody?
I've got one. The mayor and city council have asked Commissioner Kramer and myself to present to council on the 21st of this month the proposed public smoking ban ordinance. So we're preparing a PowerPoint now and getting ready for that presentation.
Congratulations, outstanding. Any other updates? Okay, anybody want to do any future commissioner-initiated agenda items?
Yeah, I have one that is not exactly environmental, but I think it would help in our work. And that is, I was hoping, I see a lot of problems with communication, in that I was hoping that possibly that we could get the public information officer to come and give a presentation on how communication works within the city, and so that we could be better at getting information out.
Yeah, we could make that happen. I can look at her schedule and see if she could come to the next meeting if there's a spot open, if it's a light agenda, and she can come and present as an informational item.
Great.
Thank you. So that would be that's a proposed informational item for a future meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, any other? Okay, well then we will adjourn, and thank you all so much.
Thank you.